This is the High School Football America podcast for January 23rd, 2020. Heading to Spartanburg, South Carolina, where a very, very special event inside Super Bowl 54 will take place in about a little over a week right now. And the new head coach at Spartanburg High School, Mark Hodge, is the guy that he's probably going to have a tough time choosing who he's rooting for because he's got three former players on the roster of Super Bowl 54 when the Chiefs take on the 49ers, players that he coached at former stops at Chapman and Carolina High, and we're going to talk about those three players for the 49ers, Deebo Samuel, 49ers defensive tackle DJ Jones, and the Chiefs, Devereaux Lawrence, and Coach Mark Hodge is on the line. We've got a lot to cover here, Coach. Super Bowl, new gig, and a state championship less than 2 months ago. Welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, let's start with the big one, which is, as I said, you got some choosing to do here, evidently, other than rooting for all your players. But to have three players on a Super Bowl roster, or rosters, I should say, I couldn't find if that's a record or not, but it's pretty darn near the top, I would think. What'd you think when you figured it out that you got three players in the big game?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. When Deebo got picked by the 49ers, it was really cool then that you had two players on, one NFL team. And then when you figured out, I knew going into the to the championship games that there was a chance that, that both teams could make it. And as soon as they did, it really didn't set in at first. But then I thought back, I've done this now for 23 years and I've never had a player at all make it to the Super Bowl, and then to have 3 and 1 is pretty spectacular. So we're just super blessed to be able to claim that.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 40-plus years, and quite honestly, I don't remember ever reading a story or hearing about it, so it's definitely a big deal. We're talking with Mark Hodge on the High School Football America podcast tonight, talking about his players, 3 of them in Super Bowl 54, 2 for the Niners and 1 for the Chiefs. And, I guess this is, kind of a fun time for you to kind of think back, right? And we all know all the stories right now that, the NFL is not filled up with 5 and 4 stars. Some are 3, some are not even a star in high school and all that. Give us a little snapshot of each player, your memories of them when they were playing high school football.
Yeah, that's such a great lead-in, too, because when I went to Carolina High School, it was pretty much referred as the worst football program in the state of South Carolina. It was underfunded. It was understaffed. We had a $0 budget. They had won like 2 games in the past 10 years. So we go in, we just felt like God led us to go there, and a couple of guys went in with us, and we started putting a program together, and there were some good players. But it was so bad that college coaches didn't even really come by just to see if you had any players. And that's so ironic because, you couldn't get many coaches to come through, and now there's 2 playing in the Super Bowl. But the first one that stands out is Devereaux Lawrence, but he went by Jamal when I coached him. He's still Jamal to me. And Jamal was this big, mammoth young man, and he had gone through so many tough situations. It was a situation at home was very rough. I think him and his mom was in an abusive situation, and at one point in time, he finally grew and kind of fought back for his mom and himself, and that didn't go as you think was planned. So then for a while, he was pretty much homeless, just kind of laid down where he could. And then a teammate who was another phenomenal player, Trey Ross, took him in, and he lived with Trey. And, it was just a great football player. He was a great kid, always had a huge smile on his face, but he still felt like he always had to fight just for anything that he had. And so he graduates, and his grades were poor. His test scores were poor. Now, the last 2 years with me, he did a real good job. He was in some academic recovery classes and really, put forth some effort. And when he graduated, he went to tried to continue to play football because he told me all along his dream was I'm playing in the NFL, and being a high school coach, what's your backup plan? What's your,
yep.
There is no backup plan, which is kind of amazing, and so he tried to dibble and dabble in a few things, and fortunately at the time, this guy named Sam Kelly, who owned a point-of-sale services company, had played at Georgia Tech. And Sam came on to kind of help us through some Fellowship of Christian Athletes stuff, and got tied in with Jamal a little bit and really a lot. Basically adopted him in the end. And we got him in Georgia military 2 years after he graduated. Kept him down there, wouldn't go back and pick him up. And then he did well there. And actually, I think it was Coach Muschamp, I believe, was looking at some film when he was at Florida on another player at Georgia military, noticed Jamal. And then when he went to Auburn, they brought Jamal to Auburn. And from there, he's gone on to an opportunity in the NFL. And still
great story.
That's very dear to me. He's an example to my kids about just, continue to persevere, continue to fight through. Like he had a knee surgery from Dr. Andrews and it didn't go right, so he had to do it twice. So it's just nothing's been easy for him. And so to see where he is today, just being able to enjoy this is just such a testimony and a blessing to continue to try to do things the right way.
And then take us on to DJ Jones.
Yep. So DJ was actually a year behind. He was a 10th grader. And, the guy Trey that I mentioned earlier was really as good as both of these two. He was physically kind of in between the two. Jamal was a little bit taller than DJ. And so we had three ridiculously good defensive linemen on one football team. And but DJ was a little different story. He's very well put together. His dad is the mom are great people. His dad owns Big Dave's Barbecue. He's actually done some things before they came to Carolina, actually with the Cowboys. And his dad actually did our pregame meals for us. Very supportive family. DJ is another great kid. He did good in the classroom. He was just always had a smile on his face. I mean, if you see him now, he's just got that pureness about him. Was a heck of a football player, super strong. So he brought a lot of stability, where because at Carolina at one year, it was an all-black football team. We didn't have any white kids on the team, and it was a situation where there was a lot of poverty. We actually had some Hispanics, but every player on the team was a minority. Mm-hmm. But DJ brought a lot of structure, just because it was such a poor economic situation. He brought stability to the team, and some emotional stability. And then, his dad and his family helped bring some resources that we may not have otherwise had, at the place. So that they were a blessing altogether, just for being able to give things and then from the relational side and the emotional side. And he was there. I coached him his sophomore and his junior year, and was then I left there to come to Chapman, and then he transferred to Wren High School and played for Jeff Tate, who's another great guy, and was a Shrine Bowl player there. But those two, it was fun to really watch them compete and go after it, and so it's just been real cool to see those two both go to the SEC, play against each other there, and now get to play each other in the Super Bowl.
Very, very cool. And then I know I've seen some interviews. I guess you and Debo Samuel are still pretty tight from your days at Chapman there. Tell me a little bit about what you remember about Debo.
Yes, sir. Debo and I are really close. When I got to Chapman, I knew he was a good player. And I remember one of our first 7-on-7s that we did. He was late, and I kind of laid into him pretty good. And I knew he had transferred to Chapman earlier in his career, and so I kind of jumped on him and told him that he wasn't the best player I'd ever coached. That he could go back where he came from. He wasn't going to do things our way. And little did I know at that time he was going to be the best player I ever coached. And he handled that really well. He didn't transfer, thank goodness. But he was a basketball kid. He loved basketball. He was just playing football. And we saw that summer that he was pretty good. And I'd been able to coach some other kids before. DJ Moore, who played nickel for Chicago Bears, is another player that I coached who was really, really close to me. And so I'd seen some good players, but then I started noticing this kid's pretty special. And then early in his junior year, he was dominating some games, and he played multiple positions. He played mainly receiver, but he also played some defensive back. And then he was kind of in not a great academic situation where we put in some new academic parameters and requirements, and he and I got close, really doing a lot of that stuff. At one point in time, he didn't have a computer at home, so I would meet him on the weekends, and we would do some of his computer things that he had for classes. And so we got to talking and, take him home and things of that nature. And then his summer between his junior and senior year, we were doing some 7-on-7s, and he was by far the best player out there. And we were actually at Spartan High one day, and DJ Moore was there watching while he was still in the league. I'll never forget that he said at that time that Debo is as good now as some players that I currently cover in the NFL.
Wow.
And then what's so wild is where we were, football is such a great, it's played so well in Spartanburg County that we were still 5 or 6 down on the totem pole of what people would consider top quality programs. And he was dominating anybody and everybody. And then he did that, that season, and we developed an actual playing card situation to move him around the field. Like Ace of Spades put him at quarterback, and we had different cards just for Debo to tell him which position on the field that we needed him at that point in time. And I think he had 2,000 yards receiving right at it and right at 1,000 yards rushing, and
wow.
Teams would try to double him, and so we'd put him in the backfield, and he played wildcat quarterback, and he played safety and corner and kick returner. I think in one game he scored 5 touchdowns 5 different ways. So he's just an amazing player, but he was so humble. And then his grades kept going up, and his test scores were going up, and the teachers loved him, and my children loved him, and he was just really dear to my kids. And I have a desk in my top left desk drawer. I keep candy for my kids, because I have 3 children. They come in and they'll dig around. They know candy's in there. Well, Debo figured that out, and one day he came in and kind of smiled at me and just opened my drawer without asking, and he got a sucker. And he kind of looked at me, and I just smiled at him. And, basically he had the guts to try. I think he knew that I cared about him enough that he could do that. And but now there's only 4 people that's ever been in that drawer, my 3 children and him.
Nice.
And we just came super close, and all the way through college we stayed close. And I adopted a little girl, and he really took to her, and he FaceTimes her before most ball games, and she calls him her boyfriend, and she was him for Halloween. So we've just been really close throughout. What I feel is when things are good, I'm checking on him, but then when he kind of gets nervous about stuff, then that's when he seeks me. Mm-hmm. But he's just become a family member. He's like a son, but he's also like a friend, and he's also a former player. So it's just such a cool dynamics in our relationship. He's just real dear to us, and I'm super excited for what he's getting to do. And it's not a surprise to me, because I've been blessed to coach great players and against great players, and I knew all along that he was very uniquely special.
Yeah, no doubt about that, and just the story you tell there with all of them, it's the beauty of the profession. I tell people around the country all the time with this mouthpiece that I'm blessed to have, which is you guys don't know what coaches do. They are more than coaches. It's no longer 4 months a year. It's around the clock. It's a 365. So congrats on that. I guess. And we, by the way, folks, we're listening to Mark Hodge talk about his 3 players, former players in high school that are going to be playing in the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the 49ers. You got 2 Niners and a Chief. Obviously, you want them all to play and all to do well. Can you pick a favor? Is that fair to ask you who you want to win?
No, I'm hoping they all do really, really well, and the game goes in about as many overtimes as it can and lasts as long as it can, and then one of those makes a play to win it. That would be perfect scenario. But either way, to hear the stories when they get back and the things that they'll share, because they'll come around and they'll speak to my new team, and we try to keep those guys involved because they all come from such a different background and different adversities and been able to cope things, that I try to put those guys and any other player that has gone on to do great things in front of our kids. And obviously, being a football coach, playing in the Super Bowl brings so much weight. So, and there's 3 such good kids to be able to put in front of my current players. So those are things I'm really looking forward to on the backside of it. It's just the stories, not just about the Super Bowl, but just the adversities that they had to overcome to get there.
Yeah, it ain't easy, as they say. Mark Hodge on the line, new head coach at Spartanburg. I said at the top, we got a lot of ground to cover. So before we get to the new gig, and you told me yesterday when I set up the interview that you're still at Chapman, wearing that hat, getting ready for the Spartanburg job, back and forth and all that. So before we get into what it's like to be a head coach in 2 different areas, let's start with the success that you had at Chapman. You're coming off a 3A state championship, a couple of titles over the last several years. And you know where I'm going to go with this question? You mentioned what Carolina was like when you got there. What is it that happened at Carolina that maybe set the tone for the success at Chapman? Is that a fair question?
Sure. We, I grew up in a small town in Packlet, South Carolina, and it was an old mill town, and the mill had closed, so it was really a poor town. And, I was very blessed that we grew up where race and economics never played a factor, because nobody had money, and in order to do anything, you had to have everybody. So, we just grew up where the blacks and the whites listened to the same music, and we did the same things, and we just were friends. And I think that totally carried over into coaching, because I had friends who didn't have money and who were of a different race that we spent the night with each other, and we were in the same classes, and they did phenomenal things. And then when I was able to coach at Broome, DJ Moore is such another dynamic story. His a lot of family struggles in his life, and he had nothing was going to tell you he was going to be successful. And then he just continued to fight the good fight, and goes to Vanderbilt, and then goes on to play for the Bears. And he ruined it for everybody else because what he was able to overcome, I then told the rest of my players, you don't have an excuse. It's a decision. And we mention the Blind Side movie every now and then. The reason the Blind Side of the movie is because he accepted the help. And so many people don't accept the help that God gives them. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that, God will take people out of your life that's not good for you, but replace them with people better. And too often, kids especially, they want to hang on what they don't have or who they don't have versus who God has put in their life. So that experience is, we went to Carolina and said, you have 2 choices. You're going to win or quit, and we're not going to let you quit. So you kind of out of choices. And we put in some academic requirements, and we put in some dress requirements where we wore ties on Wednesday, and then we required the team to clean up the cafeteria and do some community service projects and some other things. Brought some FCA stuff involved with it, and we just didn't give them anything, an excuse. And the kids did a great job of buying in. Then you throw in some great players on top of that. And through that and through developing the relationships, because trust is a big thing, especially in rough situations and poor economic situations. And once the kids trusted us that they mattered and it wasn't that the game mattered, then they became so much better at everything. And we just slowly was changing the culture. And then that team, my last year, we went to the 3rd round and actually fumbled at the very end of the ball game. We were about to kick a field goal to win, and we lost by 2. But it was the first time in 25 years that they'd been to the 3rd round, and that kind of catapulted us back into Spartanburg County, because I'd been blessed to be on a state championship team as a coordinator at Broome. So it was, Spartanburg's tight, so we're kind of known already. But then our successes at Carolina, it's kind of put us at the forefront of the opportunity at Chapman. Mm-hmm. And then we got to Chapman, and it's still about 50% poverty. It's got it's an old mill town as well, but you had a little more of an affluent factor as well. So we were able to bring the experiences from Carolina, same expectations, but actually had more support. We had more administrative support and more financial support and better facilities, a great community in Inman, South Carolina. And they quickly just embraced everything that we were trying to do. So we took the things that we did at Carolina and actually increased them here. Great expectations. If you have a D you're not allowed to play in the ball game. So every player on our team had A, B, or C in all classes in every games that they played. And that was due to the administration and the community supporting the things that we were trying to do, but we started those things at Carolina. So we were just able to continue to grow, had a bigger staff, had a more experienced staff, had a better strength program, a true certified strength conditioning coach, just a much better all-around support structures for the kids. And then you threw on top of that God threw a little bit of DNA on top of it, and we were able to really take off the last 4 or 5 years.
Yep. 53-5, I think I read. A couple of championships in there. Mark Hodge is the guy at Spartanburg now, the new head coach, but he's still at Chapman. So before we go to that, how are you balancing this here? One thing I heard you say to me yesterday when we were talking was, I want to close out Chapman in the right way. So tell us a little bit about the two hats you're wearing right now and how you're handling it.
Yes, sir. And it was a very emotional decision. I was at Spartanburg about 12 years ago as a defensive coordinator, and Spartanburg is a very unique situation in high school football. It's got a very established tradition with some Hall of Fame coaches, and but it's also so ingrained in the city that not too many there's no other place in South Carolina where the high school is as ingrained in the actual city of Spartanburg. And I don't, I don't know about the rest of the country, but in South Carolina, it's its own unique situation. And they've got a new school, and everything's really grand over there. And I say all that to say, Chapman had become home. This had become our program, and we had a vision of how we wanted to do things, and the administration was supportive, and we were putting it together, and we were winning. And I wasn't thinking about any place else. I was thinking about, what's our next step here. But my former high school coach was the head coach, Chris Miller, at Spartanburg. And he just decided it was time for him to step away. And, within a week's time, we just felt like God was saying, look, I've prepared you to go back and do some things that really we feel like's never been done. And it was hard because this is home. My wife, works here. All 3 children are in the school system. I have nothing but great things to say about this place. So it truly came down to making a spiritual decision that we just felt like we were being led. And, I preach to our kids, you got to know who you are, and you got to recognize your calling. And then you've got to have, the guts to follow through and follow your calling. And this just was an opportunity, or not an opportunity, it was a calling that we felt like we needed to answer. And so it was really hard, but some good things. We had 25 seniors. It's the first ever undefeated team at the school. So we did a lot of great things, and we don't have as many juniors. We have very few juniors. So that made it easier to tell the kids. But I tell them, all my seniors, when we kind of end, is you're about to step into the unknown. You're about to really, go places you've never been. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be strange. There's going to be times you're going to be afraid. There's going to be, just so many emotions you haven't encountered in situations you haven't been in. I said, the difference this year is when you leave, I get to go with you and experience the same thing. So, told them really looking forward to getting back together at a 25-year reunion and just see what all God's done with everybody that's stepping out in faith on this, at this time. But, so what I'm having to do now is our banquet and our ring ceremony is actually February 12th. Winning is great, but it also brings other bills. When you're trying to do championship sweatshirts and championship rings and championship banquets, and so it adds a financial burden, so to speak. So what I want to make sure we do is that banquet is first class, and it recognizes our children like they deserve, and that the place is left absolutely spotless. The equipment room is in shape, and everything's clean, and then there's no debt. Like, I want the next guy to come in and be able to love my kids and not have to worry about tying up loose ends, because they'll still be my kids.
Yep.
We run our program all the way down to the 7th grade, so I'm dear to for about 5 more years. I'm really close to some children. So,
yep.
So I want the next guy to be able to come in and not worry about anything but loving them and taking care of them. And then on the other side, I'm having to go create and establish at Spartanburg. Good things. I know a lot of people there. A lot of the administration was there when I was there. I've had close relationships with, so that helps. But it's a splitting your. It's hard enough to do one, but having to kind of split between two, it makes it interesting and creative.
Yeah, the only time when schizophrenia is allowed, I think, when you've got to hold down two different positions. So let's finish up here. Coach Hodge, the new guy at Spartanburg, you mentioned how unique it is there. You mentioned a Hall of Fame coach that you're following, and Chris Miller, who you know very well. Coach Miller, I think 5 state championships in the state. So what do you do when you go in there? What's the thumbprint you put down there on that foundation, and where do you go from here in 2020?
Yeah, I met actually with the kids for the first time yesterday in the current staff, and the last 2 or 3 years, God's really been putting on my heart player development. Football is football. Any great football team, the schematics are very similar. Cover 2 is cover 2, and a flood route is a flood route, and stick route is a stick route. So the football aspect is pretty common wherever you go. But the last roughly 2 years for sure, I've been studying the support structures that the colleges provide. And what started that was about 6 years ago, went to Vanderbilt and was watching a freshman quarterback who had just enrolled in January and February doing collegiate stuff. And at that time, I thought, well, if he can do it in February, he could have done it in October. Mm-hmm. So then we put in basically college schematics. Everything we do is pretty advanced mentally. Our weight room is top notch. We have meetings and study halls and everything else, just like you were at a collegiate program. For the last 2 years, I've been studying the other part of it, the off the field side, the support structures, the academic services, and the player development programs, and the psychological and physiological side of the game, and that part, operations. And what I've been coming to is, if it's right for a college freshman, it should also be right for a high school senior. There's been a big disconnect between high school structures and collegiate structures, and that's not just in athletics, it's in academics as well. Well, you're starting to see a transition in the academic side of high school where it's merging more and becoming more like the collegiate environment. Mm-hmm. And Spartan High's new building is designed for that. It's got a lot of just independent learning sites and a lot of places for kids to do individualized instruction. And it's a college campus that's actually put into a high school setting. But we want to do the same thing with a football program, with our requirements off the field. Our player development program, the name of it is Refined, and that goes along with the Spartanburg's known for their gold helmets and their gold buses. So that tags along with that, but it's about developing the player, the person. We want our kid, when they leave the program, to be as ready as they can possibly be for the next step in their life. And we want to develop a program where all grandmothers and mothers want their children to go to our school and be in our program, not because they got a chance to win a state championship, but because they know that we're doing all we can to help prepare their kids to live a better life than their parents did. So that's the big thing that I try to get them to understand. Is our expectations are not about winning. Our expectations are about making you better people and giving you the support structures and the services to allow you to become great, because you're created to be great. I told them I've had a player pass away in my arms before. I've had a player shoot and kill his pregnant girlfriend before. I've had a player be shot and killed for doing stupid things before. But I've also had players going to be doctors and lawyers and teachers and come back and coach for me and be just great members of society. But all of them were created to be. It's just their choices led them, to where they are or to bad situations. So we want to make sure that we put them in front of so many people and so many resources that they're safe, that they're comfortable, that they're prepared, and just anything else that we need to provide them, so when they are out on their own, that they can, successfully compete and thrive in the real world, so to speak. Yeah. And if you do all those things, then, if you got good coaches that are running good schematics, you'll win as many football games as you're supposed to.
What I said was the profession is a wonderful one, does so much for our young kids. And you know what? Before I said that was the last question, I have one more for you. I had Coach Tom Knotts on the show last week. He was our National Coach of the Year. He's done wonderful things there at Dutch Fork. But I didn't ask him this question. I'm going to ask you, since you are kind of a lifer there, right? I think that South Carolina football, though, here and there you hear a story about the Rock Hill area and all that. I think in general, excuse me, high school football is coming up and getting noticed a little bit more in the state. How would you, if you put on your Chamber of Commerce hat, describe high school football in the state of South Carolina right now?
Well, per capita, I mean, it's going to be in the top 5. And I think it's in the top 5 of all the states in America as for what it does. You have the Rock Hill area and the Columbia area where Coach Knotts is, and then you have the Anderson area, which is really invested, and Spartanburg is perennially invested. And then the Charleston, you got so many major areas that are really invested in the athletic programs in general. And then, say per capita as far as NFL players, I think it's in the top 10, if I'm not mistaken, of kids in NFL. So you got great athletes too, but the administrations in the state understand that oftentimes it's not the math teacher and it's not the science teacher that's truly connecting and making a difference with some of these kids. It's the athletics and the arts and the extracurricular, the band and the ROTCs. And then when you can combine those with the classroom teachers, then you get amazing results. And that's what South Carolina has done a phenomenal job of doing is making athletics and extracurricular and academics kind of on an equal playing field as far as expectations and support structures. And then when everybody's working together, excellence just becomes what's expected regardless of where you are when you're on this campus. And they do a phenomenal job of that. And I'm, super blessed to be where I am and in the state. And great coaches, too. The coaches are very competitive, but they tend to take care of each other as well.
Yeah, that's the key to it all. Well, I've got we moved to Atlanta a couple of years ago. I've got 15 states I've watched high school football in personally. I have not been to South Carolina. I think you convinced me that I need to make a trip to Spartanburg in 2020.
It's such close proximity. You have Spartanburg, which has such a history, and Dorman, which has such a history, and Burns. And then Gaffney's right next door in Union County. I mean, just so many schools, Greer, just in a 30-mile radius that on any year, has an opportunity to win a state championship. And it's just a very unique spot just in our little 30-mile radius, much less the rest of the state.
Well, we took about 30 minutes of your time. I appreciate that. We covered a lot of ground there. We all started at the beginning, which is you had 3 players playing in the Super Bowl. Coach, we wish you nothing but success there with the Vikings. Congrats on a great career to this point. And like you said, maybe 5 overtimes and one of your players making the game-winning play on Sunday coming next week. So thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you. God bless you now.
Mark Hodge, the new head coach at Spartanburg High School in South Carolina. Hey, don't forget to check out the High School Football America Coaches Job Board. We've got new openings going up daily, and if you have an opening, you have some needs out there, make sure you email us at jobposting@highschoolfootballamerica.com. That's today's High School Football America podcast. I'm Jeff Fisher.